will study about the case between Kerpa Singh and Bariam. My name is Muhammad Fahimi bin Muhammad Nizan, and I will explain why the plaintiff want to sue the defendant. This case started when Bariam, the defendant, owed the plaintiff an amount of 8,869.94 cents, and when he died, Bariam's son was responsible for all his father's debt. The defendant's son wrote a letter to the plaintiff and offered 4,000 ringgit as full payment. But if plaintiff refused to accept, he asked plaintiff to return the check. Then the plaintiff lawyer cashed the check and continued to ask for the balance of the debt by taking a bankruptcy notice to the defendant's son. So this matter made the defendant's son disagree and warned the court to make a decision on this problem. For further discussion, will be left to my friend to explain this case. Thank you.
In this case, the issues arose about whether the plaintiff could claim the remaining debt balance from the defendant. The defendant owed the plaintiff, which amounted almost 9,000 ringgit. Bariam's sons wrote a letter to the plaintiff that specified his check, offering 4,000 ringgit as a full settlement of his father's debt. He also mentioned that the plaintiff must return the check to him if he refused to accept his proposal. The plaintiff later cashed the check and returned the money while securing the debt balance by issuing a bankruptcy notice to the defendant. In simple terms, the defendant's son already sent a message indicating that the plaintiff should return the check if he did not accept the lower amount. The plaintiff cashed out the check but continued to demand the defendant for the remaining funds. By accentuating the lesser amount on the check, the creditor will renounce the commitment that was given to him. The creditor, since they received the check from Bariam's son in full satisfaction, they can no longer pursue their claim for the remaining debts.
Assalamualaikum. I am Najmus Sakir. Now I am going to talk about the final decision of the court for the case of Kerpa Singh and Bariam Singh. The court's decision was that the plaintiff could not claim any debt from the defendant as the creditor had accepted the tender by cashing the check and keeping the money. The plaintiff must be taken to have agreed to discharge the debtor from any future date. But still, Kerpa Singh appealed the case to the High Court and the High Court dismissed his appeal.
Next is reasoning. Under Section 64, Contract Act 1950 stated that every promise may dispense with or remit, wholly or in parts, the performance of the promise made to him. This clearly shows that how partially debt have effect to cancelling the total debt. For example, suppose A or B RM 500 and B takes RM 300 as a complete payment. As indicated in Section 64, letter B cannot sue A for the remaining debt. As in case of Kerpa Singh and Bariam Singh, the debtor borrowed the money from the creditor. The debtor agreed to pay lump sum payment with the lower by paying the lower amount. The creditor want the balance of the payment after he cash out the check. The federal court ruled that the creditor cannot get the remaining debt because he already accept the tender by cashing the check and returning the money. So he must agree to discharge debtor from any further liability.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Subir. So today, under the analysis part, I will give my opinion on whether I agree or disagree with the decision taken by the federal court regarding the Kerpa Singh versus Bariam Singh law case. So for this case, I wholeheartedly agree with the federal court's decision to not permit the plaintiff to claim the remaining debt amount from the defendant. Well, this is because, as mentioned earlier, the plaintiff or the creditor agreed to the terms and conditions set by the defendant's son regarding the settlement of the debt. In the terms and conditions, it was clearly assumed that the plaintiff achieves full satisfaction against debt payments, and the plaintiff Kerpa Singh was well aware of this. Hence, I feel that in this particular situation, the plaintiff does not have the right to demand further payment from the defendant's son, as he was completely aware of the terms and conditions set by the defendant's son while collecting the debt payment. Furthermore, to prove my point further, Section 64 of the Contracts Act 1950 clearly mentions that every promise may dispense with or remit, wholly or in part, the performance of the promise made to him. This clearly shows how partial debt payments have the effect of removing the total debt. So, to conclude, I completely agree with the Federal Court's decision to not permit the plaintiff to claim the remaining debt amount from the defendant in this particular case. That's all from me. Thank you.
Comparing and contrasting this case with other case law, we can draw similarities with the penal case. In that case, the dispute centered around a debt that Cole, which is the defendant in this case, owed to the plaintiff. So Cole approached Pinel to try and arrange a settlement, since Cole owed him £8. So Cole made the agreed upon payment of £5 to Pinel to satisfy the obligation. After that, Pinel eventually filed a lawsuit against Cole for the remaining £3. Despite Pinel accepted the lower amount as payment for the debt, the court has decided that Pinel was still entitled to the remaining balances. The agreement to accept a smaller payment did not extinguish the obligation, but rather postponed the creditor's ability to pursue the unpaid balance. So we can draw comparison between these two cases because they involve the same yet nearly identical question. Did the defendant's partial payment of the debt qualify as consideration for the claimant's promise to repay the total sum?